So we're joined now by Kristaps. Thank you so much for being on the show with us this week.
Thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. So first question we asked, tell us a little about yourself and how did you first get into BSD?
I don't know how I actually first got into BSD. It probably would have been 10 or so years ago, maybe a little bit longer. Knowing me, I just probably wanted something that was more text-oriented, because when I used computers when I was younger, there was a lot of text, and I'm comfortable. I like that.
Yep.
Graphics are a little confusing. I think also at the time, 10, 15 years ago, the graphical systems like Linux didn't really work.
Sure.
So it was a natural step. And since then, I use BSD in my day job, my regular work all the time. I work for myself. I'm a computational mathematician.
Okay.
So I use machines a lot, and usually these work together well because I, obviously will make my own source code. I'll make my own systems. I'll integrate them into BSD systems or otherwise. So I end up doing a lot of work on that.
Which BSD specifically?
I mostly use OpenBSD.
Okay.
Almost exclusively, actually, on my systems. I think most people, in terms of BSD, know me for having initially written Mandoc and the constellation of Mandoc tools like the original Man CGI. Well, not the original, that was done 400 years ago, but
sure.
the other
original tablets and stuff.
Yeah. And so that started in 2008. And since then, it's been more or less completely taken over by Ingo Schwarze, who spoke here today, or yesterday rather, to tutorials as well. And now I continue doing a little bit with Ingo here and there. I've taken a bit of a back seat in the last year or two. Before that, I was doing a lot of Mandoc stuff, but the pressures of day job sometimes take over for little periods of time. And that's it. I live in France. I just moved there a month or so ago. It's beautiful.
From where?
Before France, I was in Switzerland. Before Switzerland, I was in Sweden.
Okay.
And then there's a kind of a chain.
Sure.
Before that goes to all sorts of places.
So can you tell us a little bit about why you originally created Mandoc?
Yes, that's actually a great story. It's a little petty, though, so I'm always hesitant about telling it. But so many years ago, I'd written a system called Molt, which I think a lot of people had heard of at the time. And it was in NetBSD and OpenBSD, not in the systems proper, but and what I was doing was essentially writing a container system, not terribly unlike jail, but more like, as I later knew it to be called, Sun containers or vServer. And I really liked this approach, although I'm not sure why anymore. There was a reason I was using it. I'm not sure exactly what it was. If I really dig back, I think sysjail, which was the thing I had written in 2000 and something, begat Molt at the proddings of, I believe it was Michael Dexter who prodded me to go from sysjail into Molt. But anyway, to make a fairly long story short, I was writing the manuals for Molt, and I wanted them to appear on the web in a nice way. So I was writing a MDoc and converting it into HTML using Grow HTML, which just didn't look very good.
Sure.
And this bothered me a lot because I had a nice little website and everything had its own, fonts and so on. And all of a sudden there was a man page that didn't work with any of that. And I really just didn't like that at all. And it really upset me. And I get upset about these kind of things. And then upsetness turned to anger. And I thought it was unfair and that I would be judged based upon this. This is what happens when you don't work with many people, is you imagine these things. And I would be judged based upon how, not the manuals, what they said, because I believe it was Aleister Crowley who wrote at one point to say that they were completely unreadable, but it was the content, of course, and not the presentation, but me being me, and this is why I always hesitate to tell the story, I was more happy to focus on the fact that I didn't have Times New Roman, not necessarily that the manuals weren't saying anything.
Sure.
So I started what was then called, it was MDocML was the original name of it, and this is still the website domain name MDocML BSDLV. So this kind of started to gain momentum, and it split out MDoc term, it was called at the time, because I just started to think, and maybe it was again Dexter who prodded me, I don't remember exactly what happened, but there was an Asia BSD conference all of a sudden, and the rest is history. So it was taken up and continued working on it for a few years after that. Ingo, very early on, 2008, started working on it. He's been absolutely invaluable in terms of making it a usable system versus what I had, which was I can use it-able system.
Sure.
So, that's Ingo's the reason that it's something that everybody can use now, and not just me on my own manuals. That's how it started.
So where is MDoc gone? Has it been ported to many other systems? Is it?
I think all of them right now.
See?
So, it's in FreeBSD, but it's not used to actually render the man pages yet. But
Yeah.
at dinner last night, talking to BSDnow and Benedict Röschling, it sounds like it will be very soon.
Good. I think I actually don't know the status in terms of the other systems very well, but I think it's in many. You can find out on the EuroBSDnow website that will say exactly
Cool.
which ones it is. The current work, I think we've focused a lot in the past few months, and when I say we, I mean predominantly Ingo has focused on Man CGI, which was written originally for BSDCon 2011, maybe, and there it was actually showcased, where that was the first real semantic search of manuals, which I was really happy with at the time. And again, Ingo took that and made it something that I can play with and made it usable for the rest of us. It used Berkeley DB. Originally it was a mess. Then it was really cleaned up, and now we have semantic search capabilities. And if you go to OpenBSD's website, I think that they use the most current version as well. MDocuML BSDLV, the same one. And we're trying to pull in older BSD, not source trees, but man page trees, just because it's really interesting to read those.
And even just to watch the evolution of a utility.
Yeah.
I remember I saw an interesting talk from some other conferences, Brian Cantrill, talking about the tail utility and just how that had evolved and how they found a bug in it in the Solaris implementation where if you use the -F to keep tailing a log, if the log got rotated, it would sit at the same offset and you wouldn't see anything until the log got that big again, and then you would see stuff. And they had a lot of trouble figuring out what was actually happening. And then when they went back to the original Unix, the old Unix man pages and saw how the stuff grew and what the man page used to say, it was like,
because
wow.
it said on Solaris -F is for fail.
Something like that. What is it? mini.tus.org, I think is the name of the website, TUHS, which has all of the old Unix systems and sources available. It's a fabulous website and actually for the talk that I gave today, I'd spent a lot of time there looking through when did we originally implement cheroots or set our limit or whatnot. It's a wonderful site. So these resources are fabulous. I love them.
That's cool.
But in terms of right now what's being done, actually, Ingo and I were hacking during the conference on making the HTML output to be HTML5.
Okay, nice.
And deprecating thus the split between HTML4 and XHTML1, which I'm not sure if anybody actually used, just to make it something simple, because we had a lot of switches and kind of logic in the code that I just wanted to remove entirely.
Sure.
So it simplifies things. And what's a nice part of that, and probably the reason why I pushed in the first place, was that we get MathML as well with HTML5. And something that will be checked in soon is the ability to see EQN equations in your man pages in MathML when you output to HTML5. So I'm playing with this right now as we speak, and they look beautiful.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
With your day job involving so much math, that must be.
This is it's so useful, and even in looking with a lot of fairly ordinary web pages, man pages like I think xlib has equations in it, LAPAC absolutely, and I use this too much probably, but it uses a lot of equations, and you always have to squint when you're seeing it on a terminal and wondering, is this division or a matrix or something? So I'm very looking forward to having the system crash, accepting those inputs, fixing it, and then being able to see it in living color. So that's, to somebody like me, that's very exciting.
Can you tell us a little bit about more about Malt and what that was and how that came about?
Molt was a lot of fun. This was years ago, and keep in mind it was never it was never really taken up. But this was around the time that Robert Watson was writing the capabilities framework for FreeBSD,
Capsicum. Yeah.
Capsicum, and this was after he had discovered the vulnerabilities in systrace, which were a pretty big deal for me because I felt personally responsible given sysgel. So I took that pretty hard. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be neat just to have an environment, like a virtualization environment, that would start up with the same speed as a process, where I could have everything be completely segmented. And I'm not sure if I even had a use case in mind. I just thought that the idea was so cool and so neat that I wanted it, and so I just started doing it.
Sure.
And originally I did it for NetBSD, which was a really nice code base to break into, just for things like process separation, which involved federating the process trees. I probably say the process list, so it wasn't just one array but several per instance and so on. And it was a lot of fun, but this was quite some years ago, and I mean now if I were to do it again, it would obviously be completely different. But this was talked about, the last one at DCBSDCon in 2010, I believe it was, where I gave a demo of it and everything. But it was just a huge project. And since then, when I talked about this today in my talk, I was considering whether that actually fixes or does anything useful, because it seems to me that a lot of the security problems we have would be solved in a much simpler way if we were to just use capabilities properly, or really anything at all a lot of the time.
Sure.
And it's more or less what I got into. Not the base stuff, for example, in OpenBSD, which is there's a lot of attention, obviously, that goes into the details there. But in the general stuff that a guy like me would write, where it's got to hit the ground running in 2 weeks.
Sure.
And I don't want to spend all my time looking through systrace profiles. I just want something to work quickly and beautifully, which of course is not usually how it works. But the more I looked into Capsicum, the more I thought that this does a pretty good job of bridging the gap between overly simple and overly complicated. But I haven't looked into it a lot beyond just the man pages and a little bit of the code itself, and reading Watson's papers, of course.
Right. I think it was last night or 2 nights ago you had mentioned adding Capsicum support into Mandoc.
Yes, actually. So it wasn't Mandoc, it was the CGI.
The CGI interface.
And this I still would like to do just because we know exactly what it's going to get. And it seems that if I'm going to give a little talk on it and everything, I should probably do it. And it's not that difficult. For another open source project I've done, which is a CGI library for C, I also did this, inheriting basically from OpenSSH. So OpenSSH does a great job of, obviously, because it's OpenSSH.
Sure.
And
do a good job.
right, and being, the sort of mental caliber above myself, I just took this and was like, I'll start with this, and usually end with it also, but with enough changes. And it's not that difficult, but it's difficult enough that you really have to sit down and really think about what they're doing and why.
Sure.
And I imported that into the CGI script, and then I thought, well, it would be nice to have that for the CGI.c as well, for Mandoc. Just for my own sense of peace of mind, that when people are running Mandoc on the fly to generate pages, I'm sure there are bugs, and I'd rather not have my own servers. Please don't exploit them.
Yes.
Exploited. Well, don't exploit them until all the systracing is done, and the capsicuming, and the sandboxing, and so on. Yeah. So
I remember one of the first places Capsicum got implemented on FreeBSD was in gzip, because every time you look at a man page, you're piping it into gzip. And oftentimes you're looking at a man page as root because you're trying to do something. And you need to look it up in the manual. And so you don't want to be taking this random input and piping it into an application you're running as root.
Right.
And so they put Capsicum on gzip.
I had no idea that was the original motivation, or one of them.
Well, that was one of the first. It was it's easy
Use
to implement,
case, right.
and it was a good example of how you would use Capsicum and how it could make a big difference.
There was a conference talk, I think it was BSD Day, I think in 2012, which seems recent, but I guess it's not
Couple
anymore.
years, yeah.
And I don't remember who had done it, who did the talk actually. I just remember it was BSD 2012, and there it mentioned a whole bunch of programs that had been capsicum.
Yeah, like TCP dump, because
Yep.
that's you're purposely dealing with possibly malicious traffic and so on.
There were
and,
even some like
DH
fetch,
Fetch,
syslog D.
yeah.
These were mentioned there, so I did briefly look at them. Some of them were very easy, and that's a credit to Watson and his design. But something along those lines is definitely required. And this is one thing I talked about today, was that we've been trying to do this since 1975. So it would be nice if this decade would be the one where we figure out how to make developers think and do things properly. But we'll see how that works out.
Cool. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
Write good man pages.
Right, good man
I think that this is something Ingo and I have been talking a lot about, and it seems that other people in this conference as well, that it's a bit of a problem. Not so much in the BSD community as in other communities that I'm not going to mention.
Yeah.
I think we all know what they are.
The man pages tend that are in the base system tend to be good, but the stuff you get from ports often is all over
Sometimes
the map.
non-existent.
Sometimes
even.
non-existent.
Yeah.
I mean, generally just all over the map.
Right, and this is, it's understandable, I guess. I mean, you want to write your system, but from our perspective, that is the system, is how it's documented. And if I have to go to Google to find something, then something is really wrong. So
that's one of the other big advantages to ManDoc, is the ability to properly search the man pages. Oftentimes, you know what it is you're looking for, but you don't know which man page it's in.
Yep.
There was a neat NetBSD project a few years ago, part of the Google Summer of Code, I think, where they actually implemented a full text search that used human language queries. It's in NetBSD base, I think. You'll have to ask the NetBSD folks, but you can type, for example, and I think I was just doing this. Thomas Klausner with NetBSD was showing me where you can say, apropos, how do I security, and it will give you something, or how do I sandbox? It would give you something there maybe, but it uses human language, and that I think this was it was done by a Google Summer of Code student a few years ago. Would also be a neat addition. I don't know how useful it would be on the system itself. I mean, maybe it would be, and it's hard to see that though because of observational bias. I mean, from our perspective, we're using these systems a lot. You kind of know where everything
which
is.
man page is going to be in, but as a new user, you often you don't know where to start, and having the semantic search tools will be a big help.
There are a few people I know who are just starting out in using Unix overall, and sometimes I'm like, how do you do anything when you don't know? And the question has been asked, how do I set my password? And of course, you know instantly how do you set your password. But then I thought to myself, if I were not to know, how would I find out? I mean, apropos set password, but you get 100 things because everything has a different version of password or whatnot. And there is utility to these kind of things, even though we don't see it.
Yeah, or even just trying to document stuff. I'm always like, how did I learn how to do that?
Yeah.
I just learned it somehow 15 years ago. I don't remember.
Yeah, in that part before 2 years ago, and before 30 years ago, or within this space, it was learned. I had a brief talk with somebody yesterday about an idea that Ingo and I have been kicking around for years, but we've never done, which would be a wizard-style interface for writing a simple MDoc manual. Because the bridge between understanding, I have to write in an MDoc, and actually writing MDoc is pretty huge. There are a few dozen keywords to know, and it's another language. It's like all of a sudden needing to learn HTML. It doesn't happen immediately.
Right, and even then, it's like, well, I can take an existing man page and edit it, but starting a new one from scratch seems like
how would I do that? Yeah,
is a bigger barrier. But then it's like, well, you can copy one, but you want to make sure the one you start with is a good example,
right?
Not full of bad examples.
Now, I think if you want to look at good man pages, frankly, OpenBSD would probably have the highest quality of just, syntactically, grammatically, and so on. They have JMC, who's always looking over everything. So it's a really good exemplar for how to start. But that already assumes you know what you want in the end. So kind of a step-by-step wizard, whether it be online or a little application, would be really useful, I think. Like JS Fiddle or one of these systems where you can see the output of your...
As you're doing it, yes.
That would be a
something
really
like
sweet...
JS Fiddle for ManDoc would be amazing.
Yeah. And hopefully the person who was talking to about this yesterday. He's hearing you say that right
Yeah, it's
now.
cool 'cause-
Right.
and it kind of fits in with the man.cgi, and it really pushes the case for Capsicum if you're going to be live rendering user input.
Well, hopefully that won't be from my server.
Right, right.
Mine. I mean, it could be encoded in JavaScript. Really, it's not a difficult language. MDoc is. I mean, what are we really documenting? Functions, arguments to our command or whatnot.
Yeah.
But
Syntactic config files.
I would like, if I could have a wish list in terms of the community in general, it would be that people start to consider that, hey, we can write manuals. They're really easy. Because man, I'm tired of bad manuals. I tell you.
And the interesting thing is that sometimes the person in the best position to document something is the person that just learned it.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's like it's what I've recommended.
No bad
to,
habits yet.
right, but it's what I've recommended to students to learn something is like, well, do it, and write down documentation as you do it, and then erase it and do it again using only the docs you wrote. And if it works, then you know the docs are good.
Ah, that's good.
See? Yeah.
And that could be a good end. That might be a lot for people to do, but yeah, it's
But also, if you do it that way,
that's realistic.
because you've done it twice now, not just once, you will actually remember how to do it.
Yeah.
That is true.
Plus, you have the written version that you can save, and then you never, the couple of times, when I've documented how to do something, and then years later needed to do it again, I'm like, I'm so glad I wrote that down. Or especially if something breaks in the
Right.
middle of the night, you can be like, you're so glad that you have written instructions. And if you have those, you need to share them with the rest of us.
Well, that's my wish list, and I would, if anybody wants to get involved in MDoc or learn about it, the OpenBSD lists are good to ask. If you want to go straight to more MDoc-y sort of stuff on the MDoc ML lists, there are several listed on our website. There's a graph mailing list as well.
Sure.
People are always happy to answer. So there's a lot of resources out there. You just gotta push the buttons on the box to make it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much
you.
for
Thanks
being
for
on the
inviting
show.
me.
We really appreciate it.